Long before printing presses and mass-produced books, history's knowledge was kept alive by quiet hands in cold stone rooms. The medieval scribe worked by flickering light, shaping every letter with patience, precision, and endless care. But behind the beauty of illuminated manuscripts lay aching fingers, freezing winters, and the constant fear of one mistake ruining an entire page. Tonight, step into the scriptorium, hear the scratch of quills on parchment, and see how these forgotten craftsmen preserved the words that shaped the medieval world. If you love uncovering the hidden stories behind history's greatest treasures, hit like, tap subscribe, and let boring history for sleep guide you into the pages of the past. The halls are cold, and every sound footsteps on worn flagstones. The muted thud of a door echoes through the silence. Beyond the chapel and refectory, in a small chamber known as the scriptorium, a handful of figures prepare for the most demanding of daily tasks, the patient and exacting art of copying words. The scribe's world is one of routine and careful preparation. Monastic scribes, often monks or novices, rise before the bell for morning prayers. They move through a day measured not in excitement or variety, but in a steady rhythm of labor, reflection, and discipline. The scriptorium itself is simply furnished a long table beneath high, narrow windows, shelves lined with volumes wrapped in leather or parchment, and, at each seat, the tools of the trade: quills, inkpots, penknives, sand, and sheets of parchment, or vellum. The work of the scribe begins with preparation. Quills are shaped from the feathers of geese, cut and sharpened with care. Ink is mixed in small batches, using soot or oak galls for black, ground minerals for red or blue, and gum arabic as a binder. Parchment must be scraped and smoothed. Every page is checked for thin spots or flaws. The day's assigned text, whether a religious treatise, a charter, or a collection of laws, is set out beside the scribe. Copying is a task of immense patience. By the thin morning light, the scribe begins dipping the quill, drawing each letter with measured care, then pausing to sand the wet ink before moving to the next line. Every word must be precise. Mistakes can mean hours of tedious scraping and correction. Some scribes hum quietly as they work, reciting familiar psalms to keep their focus. The only other sounds are the rustle of parchment, the slow breath of concentration, and the distant tolling of bells. For the monastery, this work is essential. Manuscripts are rare and precious. Most libraries contain only a few dozen volumes, guarded and cherished over generations. The copying of books preserves learning, scripture, and local records. Scribes do not merely write. They illuminated red capitals, blue initials, or even gold leaf to mark important passages. In larger monasteries, there are scribes whose sole job is to add decorations, painting vines and creatures that twist along the margins, transforming dull pages into quiet works of art. The pace is slow, perhaps 2 or 3 pages in a day. Depending on the complexity of the script and the number of illuminations, the scribe must take frequent breaks to rest the eyes, stretch tired fingers, and avoid mistakes. Meals are brief and silent. Afternoon brings more copying, followed by the daily prayers and the chores of monastic life: sweeping the hall, tending the garden, feeding animals. All scribes are monks. In cities, secular scribes and notaries copy legal documents, business, ledgers, or personal letters for a fee. Some set up shop in market squares or near the town hall, advertising their services to anyone who needs a will, a contract, or a letter to distant kin. Their life is little less monotonous, filled with the same careful labor and the same risks of error. What happens when fatigue, distraction, or simple error creeps in? How do scribes correct mistakes? And what ingenious methods did they develop to avoid losing precious pages to a single slip of the quill? And what is the legacy of those thousands of quiet hours spent hunched over parchment, barely noticed by the world outside? The work of a medieval scribe is marked by repetition, discipline, and an ever-present risk of error. In the dim morning or flickering candlelight, a moment's distraction and inattentive glance, a slip of the quill can spell disaster. Yet, within this monotony, a quiet creativity emerges. Scribes learn to handle mistakes, express personality, and even leave traces of their own lives in the margins of their work. The process of copying is precise, but human error is inevitable. A scribe might skip a line, repeat a phrase, or misspell a word. Some errors are caught immediately, corrected with a knife to scrape away the ink, leaving a thin patch on the parchment. Other mistakes, unnoticed at first, become part of the text, corrected later with careful glosses or marginal notes. In the scriptorium, perfection is the goal, but practical solutions are necessary. Over time, scribes develop their own signs, abbreviations for common words, symbols to indicate corrections, or a simple rubric of nota bene to flag a problematic passage. Margins are more than empty space. In illuminated manuscripts, they become canvases for artists, but even in plain volumes, scribes leave marks: a doodle of a bird or fish, a brief complaint about the cold or the length of the text, or a wry comment on the work's content. In some books, a scribe's Latin gives way to a sentence in their native tongue, an accidental glimpse of personality. This book was written in a hard winter. One margin notes: and I am cold. Another adds, pray for the scribe, for his hand is weary. Through these notes, you sense the real people behind the pages, their fatigued humor and moments of distraction. The scriptorium is governed by rules. Silence is the default. Only the scratching of quills and the shuffling of parchment breaks. The calm yet scribes exchange glances, pass brief notes, and, during rare breaks, share news of the outside world. The head scribe or librarian checks the work at intervals, correcting errors or reassigning tasks. Sometimes an apprentice is scolded for ink blots or crooked lines, but more often there is quiet encouragement. After all, the preservation of knowledge, scripture, legal records, scientific treatises depends on their steady labor. Correction methods vary. Besides scraping and rewriting, scribes use interlinear glosses, small notes inserted between the lines, or marginal corrections added by later hands. In some books, a later scribe corrects an earlier mistake, or adds commentary, for future readers. This layering of text, correction, and annotation gives the manuscript a living character, a record not only of what was written, but of how it was read, corrected, and used. Despite these risks, scribes develop remarkable speed and consistency. Many use exemplars, model copies of the text set before them, ensuring uniformity across multiple copies. In larger scriptoria, a single reader might dictate to a room full of scribes, each copying the text simultaneously, producing dozens of volumes in the course of a year. Still, the pace remains deliberate. Quality is prized over speed, and even minor errors are carefully tracked. Illuminators add their own layer of artistry. Gold leaf is applied with a fine brush, colored pigments mixed in small shells, and delicate designs of vines, animals, or mythical creatures are drawn to the text. Even in plain manuscripts, decorated capitals and rubricated titles catch the eye. The result is a work both practical and beautiful, a testament to the patience and quiet pride of the scribe. What, then, is the legacy of these silent, painstaking efforts? How do the scribes' works survive the centuries, and what do we learn from their careful, sometimes flawed, preservation of the written word? As the world begins to change, new inventions, new ideas, how does the scribe's art adapt, and what becomes of those who spent their lives in the patient copying of books? As the centuries progress, the scribe's world changes, at first slowly, then with accelerating force. For hundreds of years, the work of copying, illuminating, and correcting manuscripts forms the backbone of learning, religion, and record-keeping. Across medieval Europe, the quiet hours in the scriptorium preserve the thoughts of saints, the laws of kings, and the discoveries of ancient thinkers. But even the most enduring traditions must, eventually, give way to new realities. In the later Middle Ages, the influence of the scribe is at its height. Monastic and cathedral libraries grow. Universities spring up in Paris, Oxford, Bologna, and Prague, each in need of texts for students and scholars. Demand for books outpaces supply. Secular scriptorial workshops devoted solely to book production become increasingly common, and city scribes and stationers begin to dominate the trade. If its scribes copy not just Latin texts, but also vernacular literature, poems, chronicles, legal codes, making knowledge more accessible to the rising middle class. Yet even as the profession expands, signs of change appear. The late 14th and early 15th centuries bring new technologies and new pressures. Paper, imported from the East and produced in Spain and Italy, slowly replaces expensive parchment, making book production cheaper and more widespread. Standardized scripts emerge, designed for speed and clarity. But the most momentous change arrives in the mid-15th century. The printing press. With the invention of movable type by Johannes Gutenberg and his contemporaries, a new era dawns. Books, once the rare treasures of the few, become available in numbers undreamed of by previous generations. In the beginning, printed books imitate the look of manuscripts, black-letter fonts, rubricated initials, even space left for hand-painted decorations. But soon, the advantages of print become clear: accuracy, speed, and affordability for scribes. This change is both liberation and loss. The endless hours of copying give way to new opportunities. Some scribes become proofreaders or editors for printers, while others teach reading and writing to a broader public. The art of illumination persists, but now as a luxury: hand-painted initials for wealthy patrons, or special commissions for ceremonial volumes. Most scribes, however, fade into anonymity, their skills overtaken by the relentless march of progress. The manuscripts they created, however, endure. Some are rebound, annotated, or carefully stored in libraries and monasteries. Others travel great distances, carried by merchants, scholars, or refugees, sometimes crossing continents and centuries before coming to rest in a modern archive. Each manuscript is a window into the scribe's world, complete with errors, marginalia, and illuminations that tell us as much about daily life as about the texts themselves. Occasionally, the personality of a long-dead scribe is still felt: a doodle of a cat chasing a mouse in the margin, a frustrated note about cold fingers, rare smile, and a painted face. Through these small details, the quiet persistence and humanity of the scribe survive, a reminder of the generations who gave their lives to the slow, careful work of preserving knowledge. So as you drift off, imagine the last embers glowing in a stone-walled scriptorium, the faint scent of ink and parchment lingering in the air. Picture the scribe stretching tired hands, closing a well-worn book, and leaving behind a legacy not of excitement or acclaim but of quiet, patient endurance. The world of the scribe, though overtaken by change, continues in every book we open. Every letter we write, a silent thread connecting us to the past, spun out one word at a time.